So, one of the very first things you are going to want to do this semester is create a semester plan. And that seems like a very daunting task, but it's not as awful as it might feel right away. And it actually is a really great resource to have throughout your studies. And it genuinely does become easier the longer you study at WVU and the more you do it. So again, we have a bunch of examples of semester plans that you can reference. So I'm going to go ahead and use my example from the 2021 spring semester. So I went through and I created every week that I was going to have a lesson. In this particular semester, I was doing like a hybrid of where I was partially away in Lawrence, Kansas, and for half the semester, and then the other half of the semester, I was in Morgantown. So I personally listed which weeks I was going to be online and which weeks I was going to be in person. I also noted, based on the academic calendar, when there would not be classes for whatever reasons there are. So this is what I always have in the very far left-hand corner. I have the week and the dates so I can keep track of, and I also make sure that I note of when the university is going to be closed. So if I have a lesson on that day, I know I can't, right? Then I have my lesson plan, what I plan to practice for that week, and if I have any performances. This setup is pretty standard among all semester plans, but if there's something that you want to change, feel free to do so. So, my very first lesson and your very first lesson of the semester, I spent talking about my semester plan, my semester goals. It's an organizational lesson, it's not a playing lesson. That's going to be the case for everybody. Now, I was preparing for a recital, so I was going heavy and hard on what I was planning to practice because I had already gone through a whole semester of lessons and I knew exactly what I needed to do to keep moving towards a recital. Um, One thing that I recommend every new student does is I would spend the first couple weeks of the semester focusing on fundamental concepts with Professor Simakopoulos. So for this week, I focused just on articulation, and then I also worked on drafting ZoomTube with Professor Simakopoulos. When I work on drafting a piece, that just means it's the first time her and I are working on a piece together. So if you are a new student, honestly, I would take like the first two, three, maybe four lessons working on fundamentals out of the TVF book, even if you're a graduate student, because you want to know how she teaches these concepts. It's going to be really good for you to have a better understanding of fundamentals and also how to teach them. So each week I went through and I said exactly what I wanted to work on in my lesson. By week 4, I was just reviewing a piece that we had done quite a bit, and then I was drafting another piece, working on another piece for the same time. I'm sorry, working on another piece for the first time. So maybe I spent 20 minutes or 30 minutes reviewing a work, and then we spent the rest of the time drafting a new piece together. And, some days I spent where we focused mostly on choreography, and that's okay too. So you can make sure that you are hitting specific pieces. You can make sure that you're hitting specific fundamental topics. It's really what works best for you. Maybe you want to work on finger technique, but you want to work on finger technique across 3 different pieces. Put that and make sure that that is what your plan is for the lesson. You do want to make sure you do that for every single week of the semester. As you get down to the end of the semester, you will see that I started to run recital pieces with piano. I ended up getting an extra lesson with a WVU alum that day, things like that. And then at the end of the semester, I didn't really know what to do, so I just said I was doing a recital run, a recital run, a recital reflection. So as you get to the end of the semester, it's okay to have a couple weeks where you don't necessarily know what you're doing. You can fill that out as the semester comes to an end. That's totally fine. The important thing is to make sure that you are filling in the practice section. And I'm going to scroll all the way to the top, hopefully not too fast so you don't get motion sick. But you always want to make sure that you are practicing 2 weeks ahead of what you are going to do in a lesson. So on week 3, I'm working on drafting Telamon with Professor Asimakopoulos. So that means on week 1, I personally am drafting the Largo section, and I was memorizing the sections that I had marked purple and blue. In week 2, where's my Telamon? In week 2, I drafted the Spirituoso Allegro section, I reviewed the Largo, and I worked on memorizing the section that I had marked green. So that means by week 3, I am ready to hit the ground running with Professor Asimakopoulos. I have all of my notes learned. I have all of my articulations. I've thought about my phrasing. I've thought about my dynamics. And then her and I are working on really crafting it together, but we're not working on basics. We're not working on notes. We're not working on rhythms. That has all been done on my own practice. And that is how you should make sure you are setting up your semester plans as well. And then you also want to make sure you note when you have performances. So this can be competitions that you might be applying for or even interested in. It can also be master classes that you know you're performing in. And it can be the convocation when we're playing in convocation. It's also important to note what you're playing so that way you can keep track of everything. And then clearly week 7, I thought I was going to be in person at WVU. So this is a pretty quick crash course on how you can organize, that's the word I'm looking for, organize your semester plan. Other people do it differently. So this person in spring of 2020, they had all of their lessons split out here. You can see their first lesson was discussing the semester, working on fundamentals. They also had fundamentals that they were working on. And then they very clearly split up specifically what they were going to be working on each lesson. If they had a Tuesday lesson, they knew what they would be working on. If they had a Friday lesson, they knew what they would be working on. And this is likely directly related to if their accompanist was going to be available or not. You can see here that their practice plan is a little bit more basic than what I had before. That's perfectly fine too, especially if you're not aware of what you're going to do. I will say if you're a new student, the more detailed you can be, the better, because it helps Professor Asimakopoulos know where you're coming from. And then performances, it's also important to make sure that you list all of your performances and you're aware of what's going on that week. So this is another example of a semester plan. This semester plan was clearly done by someone who was getting ready to leave the studio after a few years because they're working on auditions for another degree. And let's look at one more semester plan in case you're not sick of my voice yet. So again, we've got your week, you've got the whole week that's happening, you've got the lesson plan. Again, first lesson is organization. And then this person wanted to hit the ground running. They wanted to work on 2 other pieces as well, and that's perfectly fine. So clearly, they wanted to work on Great Train Race. They knew they weren't going to be able to get through all of it, so they wanted to work on it again. And then they decided to spend the whole lesson on Great Train Race. That's a really good approach to big pieces as well, especially extended techniques pieces. I would recommend making sure that you have 2 to 3, maybe 4 lessons all together back to back. So that way you can work consecutively each week with Professor Asimakopoulos and making sure you are hitting all of your benchmarks each week. And you can also see that this practice plan is quite a bit more detailed than the previous one. So again, this person is making sure that they are working a couple weeks in advance. So by the time they get to the lesson with Professor Asimakopoulos, they have all of their personal kinks worked out. So this is basically like a big gist on how to work your semester plan. If you have any questions on specifics and details, again, you can ask your studio mentors, you can ask the graduate teaching assistant. We are all here to help you and help you be successful. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And take a deep breath. You've got this.